Something is unfolding in the space you cannot see, and if you've been sensing it, you're not imagining it. There is something shifting quietly within their inner world, a decision slowly taking shape in the depths of their heart, and somehow your presence is tied to it. On the surface, everything may look unchanged. They might appear composed, distant, even indifferent. But beneath that calm exterior, a much deeper process is taking place. There is a truth they have been avoiding for a long time, and now it has grown too heavy to push aside. What you're witnessing is not simply about feelings of absence or missing someone. It goes far beyond that. This is about what your connection stirred inside them, what it revealed about their emotions, their fears, and the parts of themselves they usually keep buried. And when something like that is awakened, it cannot simply be ignored and forgotten. What is happening now is significant. It is not a temporary emotional wave or a passing thought. It feels like a turning point they cannot avoid anymore. They are standing at a place where whatever choice they make will affect the direction of their life. Whether they move toward you or choose distance, they will not come out of this moment unchanged. The tension you've been feeling has meaning. The silence between you is not empty. The distance is not random. Underneath it all, there is an internal struggle reaching its peak. Something within them is beginning to confront itself, and what follows will reveal more about their truth than any words ever could. This is not wishful thinking or emotional imagination. This is the natural unfolding of someone dealing with feelings they tried to suppress for too long. Your presence has touched something deep inside them, something they didn't fully understand or expect. And now, in the quiet moments, it keeps returning. For a long time they tried to distract themselves. They filled their time with routines, responsibilities, pride, and avoidance. They convinced themselves that space and silence would weaken what they felt. But real emotional connections don't disappear just because they are ignored. Instead, they often grow stronger in silence, not weaker. The more they tried to dismiss it, the more it stayed alive in their inner world. Because what you shared was not surface level. It went deeper than words or moments. It touched parts of them that are not easily replaced or forgotten. And now they are beginning to realize that, without fully planning to, they are now reflecting on everything, not just what you meant to them, but what this connection brought out in them. And when a person starts questioning the story they've been telling themselves, change is already beginning, even if they don't realize it yet. The real conflict here is not simply about whether to stay or leave. It is about whether they are ready to face themselves honestly. One part of them feels strongly drawn toward you in a way that feels natural and undeniable. Your absence doesn't feel neutral to them. It feels like something unresolved, something incomplete that continues to surface in their thoughts. At the same time, another part of them resists that pull, because accepting what they feel would require vulnerability. It would require dropping emotional defenses they've relied on for a long time. And that kind of inner shift can be uncomfortable. It forces a person to let go of the version of themselves they were used to being. That is why everything feels more intense now, even in silence. They are no longer just avoiding the truth, they are starting to sit with it. And in that space, questions begin to form. Why do you still appear in their thoughts so often? Why does your memory return when everything is quiet? Why hasn't anything or anyone replaced what your presence made them feel? This is the stage before clarity arrives. A person can only stay in inner conflict for so long before something has to give. And when that moment comes, the defenses they built begin to weaken. If they eventually choose to return, it won't be because everything became easy or perfect. It will be because they finally understood the depth of what was shared and realized that certain connections don't happen repeatedly in life, and if they walk away, it will not define your worth or the sincerity of what existed. It will only show that they were not ready for the emotional depth and honesty that this connection required from them. That is why what you do next matters. There is no need to chase, no need to force outcomes, no need to control the direction this takes. Let things unfold naturally. Let time reveal what emotions and words could not. What is happening within them is not small or temporary. It is something deeper, something that is still unfolding, and its final shape will become clear in time. There is something happening inside them that they can no longer fully control or ignore. It feels like an internal split, as if two powerful forces are pulling them in opposite directions. On one side, there is a deep emotional connection tied to you, carrying memories, warmth, longing, and a quiet sense of belonging they can't easily explain. On the other side, there is an older, protective part of them shaped by past disappointment, fear, and emotional wounds that tells them to stay guarded, stay distant, and avoid getting hurt again. These two parts are colliding right now, and the pressure is becoming harder for them to manage. They may still appear normal from the outside. They may stay busy, distract themselves, or act like nothing has changed. But inside, the more they try to push it away, the more it pushes back. Because this was never just about outside circumstances. The real conflict has always been within them. In many ways, you became a turning point in their emotional world. Even if they didn't fully recognize it at the time, something about this connection broke through the barriers they built to protect themselves. It reached a deeper version of them, the one that exists beneath pride, control, and emotional defenses. And now they are standing at a difficult crossroads. They are being pulled between two versions of themselves. One is familiar, safe and controlled, the version they have always known. The other is uncertain, open, and emotionally vulnerable, a version that would require them to grow, to soften, and to take emotional risks they are not used to taking. This is not an easy place for them to be, and it explains the emotional inconsistency you may have noticed. The closeness followed by distance, the warmth followed by withdrawal. It is not always about playing games. Sometimes it is what happens when someone wants connection but is afraid of what that connection demands from them. As this inner pressure builds, illusions begin to break. They can no longer fully convince themselves that what they felt was small or temporary. They cannot easily label you as just another passing experience. Instead, they are being forced into a clearer awareness, not only of you, but of themselves. Old memories start resurfacing. Emotions they thought were under control begin to return with more intensity. Even silence feels different now. Even absence feels louder. This stage is important because real clarity doesn't come from avoidance. It comes when a person can no longer stay distracted from what they truly feel. And that moment is beginning to form within them, even if it is still quiet and unspoken on the surface. There reaches a point where emotional uncertainty becomes too heavy to carry, and they are approaching that point now. Not because anything outside of them suddenly changed, but because internally they can no longer stay divided for much longer. For a while they tried to minimize what they felt. They told themselves it wasn't serious, that it would fade, that they could move past it. But emotions like this don't simply disappear. They deepen over time, especially in silence. Now those feelings are returning in waves, in quiet moments, late at night, in spaces where distractions no longer fill the gap. And slowly, without even trying, their mind keeps circling back to you. It is not loud or dramatic, but it is consistent. A presence that doesn't fully leave. Your distance has played a role in this shift. By stepping back, by not constantly filling the space between you, you left them alone with their own thoughts. And in that silence, something unavoidable happened. They were left face to face with what your absence actually feels like. The missing comfort, the missing emotional ease, the missing connection they may not have fully valued in the moment. And now, in their quiet reflection, they are beginning to compare. Not always consciously, not always in words, but internally they feel the difference between what they experienced with you and what exists without you. It is not about perfection or fantasy. It is about emotional depth, about how your presence made them feel more seen, more alive, more emotionally awake in ways they didn't expect. That realization changes something inside a person, because once they see that contrast clearly, they can't easily unsee it. And from that point, they begin moving toward a decision, even if slowly and reluctantly. They can no longer remain half-connected and half-detached at the same time. What lies ahead requires honesty. Either they continue holding on to old emotional patterns that feel safe but limiting, or they begin facing what this connection truly stirred in them, even if it challenges everything they are used to. Right now, something inside them has reached a point where it can no longer stay split in two. Fear and desire are no longer living separately in their mind. They are facing each other directly, and the pressure between them is becoming impossible to ignore. On one side, there is still a strong pull toward you. It feels natural, emotional, and deeply human. Something in them is drawn to the connection without needing explanation. But on the other side, there is fear. Not just surface-level fear, but a deeper kind that comes from past experiences, old emotional wounds, and moments where trust once led to pain. That fear tells them to stay guarded, to hold back, to avoid losing control or getting hurt again. Even if that fear did not come from you, it still has influence over them. And for a long time it was louder than everything else. But something is changing now. Slowly, quietly, their desire is beginning to rise above it. That shift is important because it shows that something inside them is moving away from pure defense and closer to emotional honesty. This is exactly why their behavior has felt so inconsistent. One moment they feel close to surrendering to what they feel, imagining what it would be like to stop resisting and just follow their heart. And then suddenly, fear takes over again, pulling them back into hesitation and doubt. Both sides feel real to them, and that is what makes this situation so mentally and emotionally exhausting. Their longing feels genuine, but their fear also feels protective. So they remain stuck in the middle, not because they don't care, but because they are trying to manage an internal conflict that feels overwhelming. Still, no one can stay in that state forever. Eventually something gives way. At some point, a decision becomes unavoidable. Either fear continues to control the distance, or their deeper feelings start guiding them towards something unknown but emotionally honest. And this is no longer just about a connection. It is also about identity, about who they are becoming through this experience. Up until now, they have been living in hesitation, overthinking everything, replaying memories, analyzing signs, trying to make sense of emotions that cannot be fully explained by logic. But feelings with this much depth always move toward a conclusion. Confusion does not last forever when emotions are this strong. It eventually demands clarity. As that pressure builds, you may notice them becoming more distant or restless. But that distance does not always mean disinterest. Sometimes pulling away is the final stage before someone is forced to confront what they have been avoiding. Staying in the middle has started to drain them. Not fully letting go, yet not fully stepping in, has become emotionally exhausting. Now they are being pushed toward responsibility for what they feel. And responsibility requires honesty. Honest reflection removes excuses. It forces them to ask a difficult question, whether they are willing to risk emotional safety for something that demands growth and vulnerability. This is where things start to feel more final. The maybe phase is slowly ending and the phase of truth is approaching. Deep down, they are beginning to understand that this is not just another temporary emotional experience. It carries weight. It feels like a turning point that leaves a mark on their life. What once felt like hesitation that kept them safe is now starting to feel like something that keeps them stuck. Because avoiding the decision did not create peace. It only created stillness, and that kind of emotional stillness slowly turns into discomfort. The emotional walls they relied on are starting to weaken. They are becoming more aware of the gap between what they feel and how they acted. They remember moments they stayed quiet when they wanted to speak. Times they stepped back when they actually wanted to move closer. Moments where pride took the place of honesty. This awareness is not easy for them, but it is powerful. Because once someone clearly sees that gap, it becomes harder to stay the same. Change starts to feel less like an option and more like something they cannot avoid. For a long time, they relied on logic to manage emotion. Distance became their coping mechanism. Silence became their protection. But emotions that are deeply rooted cannot be controlled forever. When a person is left alone with their thoughts long enough, truth naturally rises to the surface. And that is exactly what is happening now. This is not about outside pressure. It is an internal awakening. The connection is no longer something they can push aside or ignore. It keeps returning in quiet moments, in stillness, in places where distractions no longer work. And with every return, something changes. The way they interpret this connection is shifting. What once felt random is starting to feel meaningful. What once felt confusing is starting to feel significant. Slowly, they are beginning to understand that what they were really missing was not just a person, but a version of themselves that only came alive in that connection. Something inside them is reaching a point where it can no longer stay divided. They are standing at the edge of a deep internal shift, where what they feel and what they fear are no longer separate forces, but something that is directly colliding within them. On one side, there is a strong emotional pull toward you. It carries memory, warmth, connection, and a feeling they cannot easily explain away. On the other side, there is fear. Not just ordinary fear, but a protective instinct shaped by past emotional pain, disappointment, and moments where trust once led to hurt. That voice inside them keeps telling them to stay careful, stay guarded, and avoid vulnerability at all costs. Both forces are active at the same time, and the pressure between them is becoming harder to contain. From the outside, they may still appear composed. They may stay distracted, act busy, or pretend that nothing meaningful is happening. But internally, the more they try to suppress it, the more it continues to rise. Because this was never just about external circumstances. The real conflict has always been internal. In many ways, your presence became a turning point in their emotional awareness. Even if they didn't fully realize it at the time, something about this connection disrupted the emotional walls they built for protection. It reached a deeper layer of them, the part that exists beneath control, image, and emotional defense. And now they are standing in a space where a choice can no longer be avoided. They are caught between two directions. One is familiar, safe, and emotionally controlled, the version of life they have always known. The other is uncertain, open, and emotionally honest, a path that requires vulnerability, courage, and the willingness to grow beyond old limitations. This tension explains the inconsistency you may have noticed. Moments of closeness followed by distance. Signals of interest followed by withdrawal. It is not always confusion in a simple sense, but the struggle of someone who wants connection while also fearing what it demands from them. As this pressure increases, illusions begin to fade. They can no longer fully convince themselves that what they felt was insignificant or temporary. You cannot easily be placed into the category of something forgettable or replaceable anymore. Instead, they are being pushed into deeper reflection, not only about you, but about themselves and their emotional patterns. Memories begin to resurface more vividly. Emotions they thought were under control return with greater intensity. Even silence feels different now. Even absence feels meaningful. And in that quiet space, their mind keeps circling back to the same place, to you, and to what this connection left unresolved. At the same time, something else is shifting. The emotional distance they once relied on for stability is starting to feel less protective and more limiting. Staying in the middle, neither fully present nor fully gone, is becoming emotionally exhausting. What once felt like control is now starting to feel like stagnation. This is where awareness begins to grow. They are starting to recognize the gap between how they acted and what they actually felt. Moments they stayed silent when they wanted to speak. Moments they pulled away when they wanted to move closer. Moments where fear made decisions that their heart resisted. This realization is uncomfortable but also powerful because it begins to dissolve denial. As clarity builds, priorities begin to shift. Things that once felt important, like emotional distance, self-protection, or control over vulnerability, start to feel less meaningful when compared to something real and emotionally alive. And slowly, empathy begins to form as well. They start to understand what their silence or withdrawal may have felt like from your perspective. That awareness softens them. It makes emotional avoidance harder to maintain. At this stage, they are no longer just reacting instinctively. They are beginning to reflect. They are becoming aware of the emotional consequences of their choices. And when that happens, everything becomes more serious internally, even if nothing has changed outwardly yet. The final layer of hesitation begins to weaken. The old may be later, and I'm not sure mindset starts losing its influence. A deeper sense of responsibility starts forming. They can no longer avoid the fact that they feel something real. And avoiding it is no longer bringing peace, only more inner conflict. Time itself begins to feel different, less endless, more meaningful. They start realizing that staying stuck in hesitation is also a decision, and often the most painful one. This awareness does not only exist in their thoughts, but also in their body. in the emotional tension they feel when thinking about what to do next, what to say, or whether to act at all. The unknown still carries fear, but the emptiness of staying disconnected is beginning to feel even heavier. And this shift is important because when emotional avoidance starts to feel more painful than emotional risk, movement becomes inevitable. Something is now forming beneath the surface. Thoughts they once suppressed are moving closer to expression. Emotions they avoided are becoming harder to ignore. Silence, which once felt safe, is beginning to feel unbearable because it no longer hides anything, it only reflects what is already there. At the core of all this, one truth remains unchanged. You had an impact on them that cannot be dismissed. You reflected something back to them that they had lost touch with, a more open, honest, and emotionally connected version of themselves. And even in your absence, that influence did not disappear. Now they are beginning to see things more clearly. The emotional noise is fading and understanding is taking its place. What once felt confusing is slowly forming into something structured, something they can no longer ignore. The question is no longer whether this affected them. The question is how they will respond to what they now clearly see. Because when emotional truth becomes visible, it naturally demands action. It cannot remain unacknowledged forever. Whether they move toward you or choose a different direction, it will no longer come from confusion, but from awareness. The inner conflict is slowly transforming into clarity. And as that happens, the person who once hesitated is approaching a moment where they can no longer keep going back and forth between two emotional realities. At some point, one truth will rise above the rest, and when that moment comes, it will reveal more than just how they feel. It will reveal who they are when they are finally faced with the need to choose honesty over fear and truth over emotional avoidance. What unfolds in silence is not a guaranteed story about another person's thoughts, but a profound reflection of what deep emotional connection does within the human heart. It awakens hope, fear, memory, longing, and imagination all at once, creating a space where certainty becomes blurred and meaning is often shaped more by feeling than by fact. Yet within this intensity lies an important realization. Not everything that feels powerful is meant to be decoded, and not everything that lingers in the mind is meant to be controlled. Some experiences arrive not to be solved, but to transform the one who lives through them. They reveal how deeply you can feel, how strongly you can hope, and how easily silence can become a canvas for interpretation. But growth begins when awareness shifts from trying to read hidden signs to understanding inner patterns, why attachment forms, why uncertainty feels magnetic, and why the unknown often pulls the mind into endless reflection. The true turning point is not when someone else gives clarity, but when you stop surrendering your peace to ambiguity and begin reclaiming your emotional balance from imagination. Whether a connection continues, changes, or ends, your wholeness was never meant to depend on guessing another person's internal world. Real strength emerges when love no longer feels like waiting in confusion, but like standing in self-respect, clarity, and calm acceptance of what is real and what is not. In that state, silence loses its power to disturb you, distance loses its power to define you, and uncertainty loses its power to control you. What remains is presence, steady, aware, and no longer searching outside for what must first be anchored within.